Tom, thank you for being here today. I'd like you to talk a bit about the binaural beats and how they can help people attain point consciousness, which will lead them to more exploring consciousness and more abilities in the paranormal. What makes your binaural beats so special?
Well, there's a lot of things that make my binaural beats very different than the binaural beats that you'll find elsewhere on the web. One thing is that it was back in 1972, 72 and 73, in that range someplace, when Dennis and I started working with binaural beats and started optimizing them. So you probably won't find anybody anywhere on the planet that has more experience than I do in binaural beats. At that point, binaural beats had been mentioned once in a Scientific American article, but basically they fell on the floor and nobody was doing much with them. It wasn't until Dennis and I picked them up and made them an integral part of Bob Monroe's work that they kind of caught on, and a lot of people began to use them. So one thing is my experience. Now, what that experience has to do with it is that I've given a lot of talks, a lot of sessions where we do paranormal things, where we heal, we go out of body, we mind-to-mind communications, we talk to other entities. So I've done a lot of those kinds of things. And most of them, except for a few that were done in venues that didn't support the use of binaural beats, I've used the binaural beats and I've always optimized them. I've always fiddled with them. So I take the basic binaural beats that we had used at Monroe's and then I'd add things to them, or I'd make changes to them. I'd add changes in bass frequency. I'd add changes in the binaural beat frequency, all through the binaural beat. In other words, having just one binaural beat through the whole thing, that's what we did at Monroe Laboratories. Okay, but now I have the binaural beats changing all the time throughout the tape. I've got the bass frequencies changing through all the tape. And the reason I've done that is because I've found that it works better. So I've literally had thousands of people run through my courses. I don't know how many courses, but
We've
of
had
these courses,
19. MBT Events did 19.
that's about 1,000 people who have been sampling these binaural beats. And of course, I get a lot of feedback from them. I ask people how they like them, how did it work for you? That was part of my questions at the end, that they have a little questionnaire to answer is, how did these beats compare to TMI's sound? And how did, so I'm constantly learning about what works best. And I know that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work best for the next person. So they are very individual. So you have to have a large range of binaural beats so that everybody can find one that really works well for them. Because a low frequency might work really well for, say, 30% of the people, work okay for another 40%, but be horrible that they really don't like it for another 20 or 30%. And it's the same with the high end. Some people really like that 500, and some people can't stand it. It's like it's too much pressure. It's too forceful. It's too strong. They need to soften it a bit before they can listen to it. So there's a large range there. And my binaural beats have that range. They range over all the listenable range that a binaural beat could possibly have. In other words, they start down at 32 hertz, and you can't go any lower than that because most audio equipment won't reproduce anything lower than that, unless you have good audiophile equipment that costs many thousands of dollars.
You have two sets of binaural beats that complete the full spectrum of listenable ranges.
Yeah, as I was saying, you can't go any lower than that. And the 500 hertz is where I stop on the high end, because you can listen to mid-range frequencies that are higher than that and they sound okay. But if you listen to a pure tone, which is what a binaural beats are made of, pure tones, in other words, a tuning fork that you just hit, if you listen to something much higher than 500, it starts to become annoying. It's too high. It starts to sound like an alarm or a siren or something that is meant to be grating, something meant to wake you up or grab your attention. And that's not helpful. We're trying to relax people. We're not trying to convince them their house is on fire. We're trying to relax them. So higher frequencies than about 500 as bass frequencies are a little problematical. They're just too high as a pure tone to be listenable. You can listen to it, but it's just not comfortable. It's not a relaxing tone anymore once you get higher than that. So mine span that whole range. And I think they're the only binaural beats that use variations in bass frequency as well as variations in beat frequency. So they've been put together over probably 40 some years of worth of experience in what works best and what doesn't. So I'd give a group certain binaural beats, and then I'd play with them, and I'd change this and change that and lower the beat frequency a little in this part and raise it again in that part. And then the next group, I'd see whether they had more or less success with those and how did they like them. And I changed it a little bit more. So mine have evolved, I guess, over a long time. And I don't know of anybody who would have more time in evolving binaural beats than I have had. So that's one thing that makes my binaural beats different. The other thing is that I do have ranges for everybody. If you particularly like the higher bass frequencies, well, I have those. If you particularly like the lower ones, I have those. If you like mixtures of those, one of the things I do is change up the bass frequency as it goes. And what that does is that people notice the change. And they notice the change, that triggers a little bit of activity, say in the alpha region, which wakes them up a little. The problem with many people is they listen to a binaural beat and they get down to the 4 hertz, and sometimes I go down into the 2 hertz. Well, that's right on the boundary of delta. You go from theta to delta, and delta is when you're unconscious. So there's some people will put on the binaural beats, they relax, and they're gone. They go unconscious. Well, that's not helpful. You miss the whole exercise. You wake up at the end and you've missed everything. So the beats that I have designed will every once in a while kind of tap you on the shoulder, get your attention back, remind you that there's a mission here, something you're supposed to be doing, and kind of get you going again. But then it drops you down into that low space, but just long enough for you to be comfortable there, and then it'll pull you up a little bit to tap you on the shoulder again and say, remember, you've got a mission here, get back to work. So I have those kinds of things going on all through the tape, which tends to eliminate almost entirely the dropouts, so that people partway through, they just drop out. I guess in TMI parlance, that would be click out. They click out partway through, and after that, they're missing what it is they're trying to do. They lose the exercise entirely because they're clicking out. So I have a lot fewer click outs when you listen to
Well, I
mine.
know you've had a lot of good feedback on them, and
Yeah.
the way you have worked the lower frequencies, I think is really interesting because those lower frequencies really grab. That's a feeling space. And
Yes.
the higher frequencies is that zoom out of the body, boom,
Yeah.
like that. So there is something for everyone.
Yeah.
And thank you for
Yeah.
explaining that. And I
Yeah,
hope
you're
you'll try
welcome. Yeah,
those.
you're right about those lower spaces. You get a good 32, and if your equipment's capable of reproducing it with any volume, you feel it as much as you hear it. All your body moves physically. It moves your body around with that lower frequency. If you play it out on speakers, like if you have a good expensive stereo that'll reproduce that well, and you play it out to your speakers, you get down to 32 hertz and suddenly your cups start walking across the table and books start sliding off of bookshelves, and everything in your house starts to move and shake, because at that frequency, it there's enough power there to move things. And you feel that all through your body and your body organs and all of that. And some people don't like it, but other people love it because they take those body sensations, turn them into a pathway for them to say, get out of body. and then it turns out to be very good for them. But yes, those are felt more than heard. And if people have a negative problem, they're fearful, they think things are going to get them, then those low frequencies are probably not so good for them, because those physical feelings, they may translate that into fear. But for those people who are more confident and not so fearful, those lower frequencies generally are really great, because they kind of lift you out and take you on a stream of sound more easily than any of the higher frequencies do. You just kind of float away on them.
That feeling information comes in very handy. It helps you receive information, and that's really an interesting aspect of it. There's something
Mhm.
for everyone, and I think that the lesson that you often stress is for you to really experiment with them. If you don't
Yeah,
like one, it's not right for you. Do a lot of experimenting, test the high and the medium and the low, and since you have that full spectrum of listenable ranges, you really have everything possible, lots of
yeah.
possibilities.
Not only do you test them all, but you test them all often, because many times I've started bunches of people, and I may start them with a 500 hertz, so the high frequency, and I'll find that maybe as many as half the people don't like it. It's too intense. But that's because that's just right out of the box. That's too much too soon for them. But I do this sometimes just to experiment, to see how different people respond. By the time we get to the last day of the course, that 500 is their favorite thing. They just love that to death, because it really grabs their EEG and slams it all into theta
It's
state.
a
It puts them,
blast.
yeah, it works really strongly, but they have to be ready for it. So by the end of the course, they're ready for it and they like it. But in the beginning, when they weren't ready for it, they disliked it. And whether you're ready or not just changes from moment to moment, from day to day. It has to do with your feelings, your attitudes, what kind of things you're dealing with, what kind of fears do you have up closer to the surface than not. And all of those things change. So you may listen to one of these and say, oh, that was terrible. And the next time you listen to it, it may be the best one that you've ever heard. So you have to constantly change them up. So there's like almost 30 of them, 28 of them, plus a sleep and something else. So there's really 30 of them altogether, something like that. You need to go through them and explore them once before you start, but then probably 3 or 4 months later, you should go through them again. And 6 months after that, you should go over them again. And at least once a year, you should just try to go through the various sounds, because I can guarantee you the ones that you discarded early on will be your favorites later on. So as you grow and as you change, then the kind of beats that work best for you change too. So that's why I do so many of them, because it gives people the flexibility to sort through things. It's not like, here's one, listen to it, it works or it doesn't, but here's a set that you can listen to. See, do you like the higher frequencies, the one where they change up a lot, the lower frequencies? There's all sorts of combinations there.
And all
And
expertly tuned and worked with from
yeah,
your experience.
yeah.
So not only do you get all of both spectrums, but you get the pink noise. Now, what is the pink
Mhm.
noise do? You've got the pink noise and the sleep tape. What do those do?
Well, the pink noise is it's just white noise is random noise. Okay, now we take noise in audio. So you have an audio signal, and if the frequency of that audio changes randomly, say between what 0 and 20,000, your hearing is really 20 to 20,000. And I say your hearing, probably not your hearing, probably not my hearing, but kids somewhere from the age of like 6 years old up to probably about 25, they hear from about 20 to 20,000 hertz frequencies. So if you just randomly pick a frequency between 20 and 20,000, just randomly pick them, that's white noise. There's no signal there. It's just a random selection of frequencies. So white noise is kind of harsh. It's got this sort of like static. on a radio. Well, that's what is static, because when you're listening between stations, you're just getting random stuff. So that's turns out to be white noise. Now you put a filter over that and you take out a fair amount of the higher frequencies, just leaving the mid-range and the lower. And then from that really kind of sharp, from that you get a, it's more soothing. It starts sounding like surf. It starts sounding like wind blowing through the trees. It has a more natural, relaxing sound to it. That's called pink noise. So it's just white noise with the high frequency end thrown away from a high-end filter. So that is available. Some people love to put their binaural beat on top of pink noise. So the binaural beat's there, but the pink noise is too. These are probably the same people that turn a fan on at night to go to sleep. Not because they need to stir the air, but because the noise that the sound makes helps them go to sleep, because it's this background sound. So there's some people that take that background sound and it becomes like a cloud that their mind is floating on. And that helps them sleep. It helps them get into a better state of consciousness. So if you put the pink noise on it, then you've got that little behind the scenes, behind the binaural beats, you've got this shh going on. Okay. If you don't have that, some people just like it straight up. That background noise annoys them. It sounds like they've got a radio or TV on between stations and somebody needs to turn the damn thing off. They have a negative attitude between that because they associate it with static. So they hear it and it's like, oh, that's awful. Turn that off. So pink noise is one that you can, many of mine that I have, I do with and without pink noise. So for the people that like pink noise, it's there. For the people who don't like it, they don't have to have it. So that's the pink noise thing. Now the sleep tape is something that runs mainly at the delta. So it slowly drops you down over about 10 or 15 minutes down into a delta state and then tends to keep you there. So it makes it easier for you to fall asleep. Sometimes you feel like you're just on that edge but can't quite seem to fall asleep. Well, this will drag you down into that sleep state so that you will lose consciousness more quickly. It's a simple little thing. Now in my normal audios and all of the binaural beats, no matter what their bass frequencies are, I had times drop down into that 2 hertz. Now most people don't ever go there because that's the dropout, lose consciousness. But I'll go down there for just short periods of time. And short periods of time are very small pieces. So I'll go down there just to kind of pull the person down a little bit. Then I'll change it. I'll let that go. And I'll do other things. And every once in a while I do, like I say, the tap on the shoulder. I'll run the binaural beat up to say 8 hertz up into the alpha range just to help them stay awake and keep working. So I dip into the delta region off and on for short periods of time, and I go up into the low alpha for very short periods of time. And some of these are very short. Some of them are as short as like 20 seconds. Other ones are as long as 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So they're all mixed as to what it is I'm doing, when I do it, how soon they occur. You have to have more wake-up calls as you get further along in the experience because you're more likely to click out. You don't need those up in the front. So there's just all sorts of things that go into the binaural beats that help it work better for people. So I have all this technology in there, but it's not just uniformly in there. It's different, whether it's the front of the tape, the middle of the tape, the end of the tape. The technology changes because people's needs change, actually, as they get into these states. So anyway, they're probably pretty unique.
Yeah.
They're based on a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error, trying to optimize them over the years. And they give a selection, enough of a selection, that almost everybody will find something that really works well for them.
Thank you, Tom. I'm so glad you went into detail because the general audience will understand how valuable these are for their exploring consciousness, and the more technical people will understand the nuances of having the full spectrum of this listenable sound range. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.